For our INFO474 final project, we decided to take a look at the dataset of Seattle Airbnb listings that we found on Kaggle. We chose this topic because we wanted to gain further insight into what made Airbnbs popular around the Seattle area. So our visualization should be seen as tools to help users compare Airbnbs and make informed decisions on what makes an Airbnb best for them. With that being said, our overall research question is looking at what features are important to users when selecting Airbnbs in Seattle, and therefore what makes an Airbnb popular. Without further ado, let's jump straight into the visualizations.
This visualization was made in Tableau and includes a visualization in tooltip. It helps us determine the most popular locations and correlate it with how satisfied users are, using color for overall satisfaction and size of points for the number of reviews. The Airbnb points can be filtered by overall satisfaction to see which locations have the highest satisfaction of 5. The most popular locations for Airbnb seems to be in Seattle, while there are less Airbnb locations in Kirkland, Bellevue, and Newcastle. And by hovering over the points, we can see more specific information about the Airbnb. More specifically, the larger points have a high rating of 5 and a large amount of reviews. So if we look at the largest points for overall satisfaction of 5, we can try to understand what features people value the most when making a decision about where to stay. For example, let's look at Airbnbs in the city of Seattle. This area over here looks like it has a lot of large points, so I'm going to zoom in and see what kind of trends we can find. When we look at the Airbnbs with the overall satisfaction of 5 and the largest amount of reviews, it looks like people are most satisfied when the location's number of accommodations are both higher or lower than the city's average, but the price of it must always be below the city's average. This suggests that price is an especially important feature when someone is trying to find an Airbnb.
I wanted to understand what buzzwords were important to people when selecting their Airbnb. I went through the title data to find out what words would show up the most often and created a word cloud from it. How a word cloud works is it uses the words in a string and counts how often that word shows up. The more often it shows up, the larger and closer to the center of the word will appear. The process does involve normalization. For instance, all sentences had to be broken up word by word. I found that Tableau does not like comma delimited as much as it likes page break delimited. Also, Tableau is case sensitive, so I made all the words lowercase in order to have cases of that word counted together. I did eliminate common words such as in, and, on, etc., as they show up often but do not contribute to answering the research question. The most popular word was Seattle, showing up 1,203 times. The most popular neighborhood to stay in or near was downtown, showing up 687 times. Capitol Hill came in second at 435 times as the most popular neighborhood to stay in. The type of living arrangement was a popular word to include as well, which was an apartment style, being the most popular, 890 titles. For aesthetic, modern was the most popular, with that word being included 572 times. I included a filter on the right that has our range from 100 to the most popular word count at 1,203. That's where you could see right here with the darkened filled in gray. See, when I try to move it over 1,203, then Seattle disappears. You can move the sliding scale to include more or less words in that count. I have each word listed in the legend for the most popular or least popular, and you can click on each word to highlight it in the word cloud.
This visualization focuses on contrasting Airbnb features with differing price ranges. Users are allowed to change the visualization to reflect different features. They can choose to scale the size of points by the number of bathrooms or bedrooms an Airbnb offers, or the number of patrons that an Airbnb can accommodate. For example, changing from bedrooms to bathrooms changes the way that all the points are scaled. On top of this, users can filter the points that appear on the map by price, allowing them to pick Airbnbs that are more or less expensive. This is particularly useful for a user who wants to look for an Airbnb in their own price range and wants to see where locations that fit their needs are. Hovering over any point also provides the user with more details about that Airbnb. As for our research question relating to which Airbnb factors that people find the most important, we can use this visualization to see which features carry the most monetary value. There seems to be only one Airbnb priced over $1,000, so we'll count that as an outlier. Looking at the bathrooms, we can see that while a higher price range from $300 to $1,000 is occupied mainly by larger points, meaning more bathrooms, a lower price range from $16 to $300 tends to be occupied by points with single bathrooms. Changing the scaling to bedrooms, we see that there are many points in the same price range that have multiple bedrooms. Going back to the larger price range, we see that there is still an average increase in number, but it is much more varied than the number of bathrooms in the same price range. From this, I would conclude that an increase in the number of bedrooms or bathrooms an Airbnb has typically correlates to an increase in the price of that Airbnb. However, because the range of the number of bedrooms is more varied in both price ranges, I would say that the number of bathrooms has a stronger correlation to the price. Meanwhile, changing the scaling to accommodations, we see that the number of people an Airbnb accommodates varies wildly. That said, I would say that accommodations does not have as much of an impact as the other two values.
So to start out for my visualization, I decided to make a group of Tableau scatter plots that compared a couple of different things about Airbnbs in Seattle. So I compared accommodation numbers, price, overall satisfaction, bedrooms, and bathroom in an attempt to see which had trends that we could potentially gain insight from analyzing further. At first glance, there don't really seem to be any extremely significant trends. There's a couple that you might expect. As you can see here, as the amount of bedrooms increase, the price increases. And as this amount of bedrooms increases, the number of bathrooms also increase. But there aren't really any trends that are very surprising that when looking into, you might be able to gain a ton of more insight from. So I decided to look at one that was surprising to me and analyze that further in a D3 scatter plot with some tooltips in the visualizations. And that would be the price versus accommodation size. Because here, the amount of people an Airbnb can hold does not go up at anywhere near the same rate, as nearly as stable, along with price, as bedrooms did. So I thought that was interesting and decided to look at it further in a D3 scatter plot. Here's my scatter plot comparing Seattle Airbnb prices to the accommodation size, aka the number of people that a given house can hold. When initially looking at this graph, I was pretty surprised because, as you can see here, the home that can hold the most people, 28, is nowhere near the most expensive home. That one here can hold 16 people, which is kind of surprising because there doesn't really seem to be an extreme correlation between the amount of people a home can hold and its price. As you can see here, a lot of the ones that can hold 20 or more people are actually fairly cheap price-wise compared to some of the other ones. And looking further at this, I can see through looking at the map that Zajan made in D3 that a lot of the more expensive homes are actually in that downtown Seattle and kind of U District neighborhoods, which goes to show that price really is more decided by location than it actually is the size of the home. But I didn't want to stop there with this scatter plot, so I decided to analyze things further and see if accommodation size impacted the ratings that someone left at a house. So through that, I decided to make these pie charts that compare the overall ratings in a pie chart for the accommodation size and group those up to kind of see where people leave ratings. Then I wrote the average rating here to kind of see what were the average ratings for the sizes of homes to see if that really changed based on the size of home. And it really didn't in looking at it further. Sure, the lowest one was here with the homes that could only hold one person at a 4.75 average. And one of the highest ones was the 28-person home that has an average of 5-star ratings. But that doesn't really seem to trend up and down throughout. If you look at it here, the averages kind of randomly go up and down as we go. It doesn't seem to actually have really a trend that screams positive or negative correlation. This really leaves me to conclude that people don't really leave middle of the ground ratings, with the lowest average being a 4.75 and the highest being a 5, and them fluctuating a lot in between. It seems people mostly leave positive ratings with only kind of negative ones or middle of the ground ones if they have a really bad experience. This shows that reviews are skewed toward the positive side. This data shows that accommodation number does not truly impact the ratings people leave after their stay. But it also warrants the question, with so many high averages across the board, are people actually 100% truthful in their ratings, or are people just having amazing experiences with Airbnb across Seattle? Either way, looking at this visualization here, and going back to our initial question, looking into what matters most to people when selecting Airbnbs in Seattle, we can really see that accommodation size of the house doesn't matter that much to them, because it doesn't really seem to impact the price of the house that much, and it doesn't really seem to impact the rating that people leave behind.
To wrap up, here are the major statements that we've made on our research question that asks, what features are important to users when selecting an Airbnb? First, having an Airbnb in or near downtown Seattle was a common term people searched for when looking to buy an Airbnb. Second, when the price of an Airbnb is below the city's average, it seems to be correlated with higher satisfaction. Third, accommodations, or the number of people who can stay in an Airbnb, does not seem to impact the price. It does not seem to be important to people, especially when comparing with results found by comparing locations. And finally, the number of bedrooms and bathrooms that an Airbnb has both have a general positive correlation with price and therefore user demand, but the correlation between bathrooms and price seems to have a stronger correlation.